monarchy will be shifting in a slightly different direction.
I think it's safe to say that change is.
William had entered the private meeting expecting paperwork, signatures, and discussion about Diana's remaining personal effects. Instead, one sentence from the palace lawyers stopped him cold. A hidden safe connected to his mother had finally been legally identified, and Princess Charlotte, not William, Harry, or the Crown, had been named as its sole intended recipient. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then William's restraint shattered. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William stared at the estate lawyers across the table, trying to understand how an administrative briefing at Windsor had become personal. The closed legal meeting mattered because the documents before them had just passed authentication. The process used to confirm signatures, records, and ownership instructions are genuine. He had expected questions about storage and Diana's remaining effects. Instead, the lawyers told him that her undisclosed private safe, together with everything legally registered inside it, had been left to Charlotte under a sealed succession instruction, a legal direction that determines who receives property once specific conditions are met. William shoved his chair backward. The scrape cut through the silence. How could this exist for years without either of her sons knowing? He demanded. One lawyer held his gaze and answered that the secrecy had not been an accident. Diana had approved the restriction herself. That answer hurt more than William expected. As her son, he felt shut out of a final choice made by the mother whose death had shaped his life. As Charlotte's father, however, another instinct rose immediately. Whatever Diana had chosen for his daughter, nobody would exploit it. The lawyer opened a second folder and explained the condition that changed everything. Neither William nor Harry could claim, sell, distribute, or permanently remove anything from the safe on Charlotte's behalf. Diana had built the arrangement to survive adult pressure, family disputes, and even royal rank. William's anger sharpened. He wanted to know who she had feared, who she expected might interfere, and why she had placed such extraordinary protection around a granddaughter she would never meet. Then William noticed a line near the bottom of the authentication sheet. His expression changed. Attached to the inheritance record was a handwritten memorandum explaining why Diana had chosen a future female descendant of William's line. He picked up the summary, read Charlotte's name twice, then placed the page flat against the table. Why her? The lawyer did not answer. He reached instead for a sealed envelope. William had arrived furious over a hidden inheritance, but the explanation behind Charlotte's name was about to turn that anger into something far more personal. The inheritance placed 3 generations into one impossible emotional moment. Diana, the mother who could no longer explain herself. William, the son who believed he understood her instincts better than most. And Charlotte, the granddaughter Diana never lived long enough to hold. Yet the deeper William looked at the decision, the harder one truth became to escape. This was not merely about valuables. Diana had chosen a person. William left the legal room carrying 2 wounds at once. As Diana's son, he wanted answers from a mother whose absence had shaped almost every major chapter of his life. As Charlotte's father, he felt something stronger than anger, fear. The princess had grown up inside royal tradition without being the direct heir, meaning Diana's choice had nothing to do with the throne or seniority. Royal succession, the formal order deciding who inherits the crown, could not explain this. Charlotte had been selected for another reason entirely. William made one decision immediately. Charlotte would not be told yet. He knew how quickly a private inheritance could become a public burden, especially when Diana's name was attached to it. The safe was already becoming more than an object in his mind. Lawyers had confirmed that its sealed inventory included personal correspondence, private belongings, recorded material, and one compartment requiring separate authorization. He refused to let his daughter carry that mystery before he understood what it meant. Catherine found him late that evening sitting alone with an old photograph of Diana beside him. William did not look up when she entered. He simply asked how a mother could leave something to a granddaughter she knew she would never meet. Catherine sat beside him and let the silence settle before answering. She told the prince that his anger was mixing 2 different pains. Diana's decision might hurt him as a son, but Charlotte should never feel guilty for having been chosen. William said nothing. He knew she was right. Then the deeper truth emerged. During a documented legal briefing, The lawyers explained that Diana had never written Charlotte's name at all. Her instruction described a future female descendant from William's line who would occupy a particular place within the family. Years later, when the conditions were reviewed, Charlotte was identified as the person who matched them. William felt the meaning shift beneath him. Diana had not chosen a granddaughter she personally knew. She had chosen a future role. Catherine looked at the photograph again and spoke softly. Perhaps Diana had not been choosing someone she knew, she said. Perhaps she had been protecting someone she believed would someday need her. That possibility changed everything. To understand why Diana had created such an extraordinary safeguard, William would have to return to the forgotten incident that first convinced her the safe could never remain under ordinary royal control. Years before Charlotte existed, Diana experienced one private confrontation that changed the destiny of everything inside the safe. It was not a grand royal showdown. There were no cameras, crowds, or public accusations. It happened behind a closed door, during an argument over personal letters she believed belonged to her alone. By the end of that conversation, Diana had reached one conclusion. Certain pieces of her life needed protection from everyone. Diana had already begun separating the things that mattered most to her from ordinary household possessions. Personal correspondence, handwritten reflections, sentimental gifts, and private keepsakes carried meanings that money could never measure. A private archive, meaning a protected collection of personal material, kept outside normal family administration, offered her something increasingly rare: control. She feared that after her death, intimate pieces of her life could be pulled into disputes, divided by convenience, or used to support arguments she would no longer be alive to challenge. Diana reached her breaking point during a private estate meeting in the mid-1990s. Her legal advisor explained that several personal letters might eventually fall under family administrative control unless she created stronger protections around them. She closed the folder immediately. Then she refused to hand the letters over. According to the documented account prepared afterward, she told the advisor that nobody should ever decide which parts of her private life were useful enough to preserve and which could simply be absorbed into somebody else's version of her story. Diana left that meeting shaken, because the argument was never really about paper. She had spent years watching other people define her motives, her failures, and even her emotions. Now she feared losing control after death as well. William and Harry complicated that fear further. She loved both boys fiercely, yet she understood that each son would one day carry duties, loyalties, and pressures that might collide with protecting their mother's most private memories. Then Diana proposed another path. Her advisor recorded the idea of eventually passing the collection to a future female descendant from William's line, someone close enough to understand its emotional weight, but far enough removed from Diana's immediate conflicts to inherit without carrying the same wounds. The idea was extraordinary. It also explained why Charlotte's eventual identification had been built into the arrangement long before her birth. Diana returned to her advisor after the meeting, removed the disputed letters from their folder, and placed them beside a small key. She wanted, the recorded account said, a structure that could survive personalities, marriages, titles, and arguments. Later, she added a handwritten memorandum asking that the contents be preserved as memory, never power. Decades later, that sentence disturbed William more than anything else. If Diana had feared outside control then, who now possessed the authority to decide when Charlotte could finally open the safe? William intended to find out, and this time, he would confront the people holding that power face to face. William returned to the lawyers with the anger of a son and the authority of a future king, but neither guaranteed him control. The meeting began politely. It did not remain that way. Within minutes, he discovered that the people sitting across from him had known for months that Charlotte might become Diana's beneficiary, while William remained unaware. Then came the sentence that pushed the confrontation beyond anger. They had been legally forbidden from telling him. William demanded an explanation before anyone could soften the truth with careful language. The lead lawyer told him the authentication process had taken months, because Diana's handwriting, signatures, custody records, and the safe's chain of ownership all had to be verified independently. Authentication meant confirming that every document and signature was genuine before any inheritance claim could legally stand. William had been excluded because, as Diana's son and Charlotte's father, He was considered too closely connected to supervise the process without raising questions about its independence. William leaned forward. "You knew my mother had left this to my daughter and said nothing?" His voice hardened with every word. The senior lawyer answered that they had suspected the designation, but suspicion was not legal certainty. William shot back that the distinction gave him no comfort. For months, strangers had been examining something tied to his mother while he remained outside the door. Then Charlotte's name changed the temperature. William made it clear that nobody would turn his daughter into the center of an inheritance spectacle. He would not allow private letters, sentimental objects, or speculation about Diana to become pressure placed on a child. The lawyer reminded him that this was exactly why the protective clause existed. Diana had built the arrangement to keep adult conflict away from the beneficiary, even when that conflict came from people who loved her. William removed his glasses and dropped them onto the table. "I'm finished hearing procedure," he said. The room went silent. The lawyer slid Diana's instruction toward him and explained the 3 conditions. Charlotte had to reach the required legal threshold, the independent custodian had to certify the transfer, and the explanatory memorandum had to be read before the safe could be opened. Then came another shock. The safe was divided into separate compartments. One held sentimental property. Another contained personal correspondence. A third appeared only under a coded designation. Even the legal team had not opened it. William stared at Charlotte's name again. "You can be her father," the lawyer said quietly, "but this document does not make you the owner." William's anger cooled into something sharper. "Then who is the custodian?" the lawyer answered. And in that moment, William realized Diana had placed the final authority in hands he never expected. The revelation wounded his authority, but the identity of that custodian would prove that Diana had designed something even the future king could not command. William had spent years preparing for responsibilities almost nobody else could understand. Yet Diana's arrangement placed him before an uncomfortable truth. Royal rank meant almost nothing inside this inheritance. The safe belonged to a private legal structure, and that structure answered to a custodian rather than a prince. When William finally learned who controlled access, his frustration returned, not because the person was hostile, but because Diana had deliberately chosen independence over blood. William listened as the lawyers explained the system his mother had created. Diana's instruction established an independent stewardship mechanism, meaning a legally protected arrangement in which a custodian guards property until the named beneficiary meets the required conditions to receive it. That distinction mattered because neither the monarch, the heir, nor another relative could simply order the safe opened. Rank carried enormous power inside the monarchy. Here, it carried none. Charles received the legal summary privately because any discovery involving Diana's personal material could affect how the palace handled related records. He read every page without interruption. When the king reached the final sheet, he placed it down and remained silent. The value of the inheritance did not seem to trouble him. The safeguards did. Each restriction suggested that Diana had believed her private memory needed protection from the institution surrounding her, and Charles understood exactly what that implication meant. William had already moved beyond outrage. He pressed the custodian for guarantees instead. Could Charlotte ever be forced to release private correspondence? Could palace officials pressure her to disclose what was inside? Could anyone use her age, her position, or public expectation against her? The custodian answered no. Diana had built those protections into the arrangement precisely because she understood how quickly personal memory could become public property. Then another clause surfaced. Palace communications staff were forbidden from announcing individual contents without Charlotte's permission, once control legally passed to her. The provision was startling because it showed Diana had anticipated more than family interference. She had anticipated curiosity, headlines, and the pressure to explain herself long after death. William felt the final revelation land differently. Diana's memorandum did limit him, but it did not remove him. It named Charlotte's father as the person responsible for preparing her emotionally for what she would one day inherit. William could not command the safe. He could not control its contents, but his mother had still trusted him with the person who mattered most. Charles closed the folder and looked directly at him. "Does Charlotte know?" William answered no. The king nodded slowly. "Then perhaps keeping it that way for now is the first decision we can make together." For one brief moment, Father and son agreed. But secrecy was already beginning to collapse, and when the first family reaction came, the hidden safe stopped being a private legal matter and became an emotional fault line. The secret did not explode through the palace all at once. It moved quietly from lawyer to principal, from principal to trusted relative, from one closed conversation to another. Yet every person who heard Charlotte's name attached a different meaning to it. Some saw Diana's foresight, others saw exclusion. And for William, the hardest moment came when he realized the inheritance could reopen a wound that had never truly healed between Diana's sons. William moved quickly to contain the fallout. Access to every record connected with the safe was restricted, while the inheritance review continued, and palace staff were warned that no descriptions, objects, or archive references could circulate beyond the approved legal circle. An inheritance review, in simple terms, is the process of checking who legally receives property and under what conditions. That mattered because one careless disclosure could turn Charlotte's private legacy into a public battle before she even understood what had been left to her. Catherine agreed that their daughter should remain protected from the noise. William told her he wanted Charlotte's daily life untouched until they understood the full meaning of Diana's instructions. Catherine supported that instinct immediately. She knew the danger was not simply curiosity. It was expectation. The moment people believed Charlotte possessed something deeply personal from Diana, they would begin demanding explanations from a child who had never asked to become the guardian of anyone's memory. Harry learned the truth privately soon afterward. His first reaction was silence. Then he asked William the question neither brother wanted hanging between them. "Did you know before this?" William answered immediately. "No." He explained that he had discovered the arrangement during the legal briefing and had reacted with fury himself. Harry listened, still hurt, but the answer changed something. For once, neither brother stood on opposite sides of Diana's legacy. Both had been deliberately kept outside the safe. Harry eventually asked the harder question. Why Charlotte? Why not one of Diana's grandsons? Why not all the grandchildren together? William had no complete answer, because he still had not read the memorandum in full. The lawyers had already clarified through their documented briefing that Diana's other gifts and provisions remained separate. The safe was not a ranking of affection. It had been created for one narrow purpose: protecting a private collection from the emotional battles surrounding it. William ended the conversation more shaken than angry. He stood alone for several minutes afterward, until Catherine joined him. She said nothing. "The worst part isn't that she kept it from us," William finally admitted. Catherine waited. "It's wondering what my mother believed Charlotte would understand that Harry and I couldn't." William knew there was only one way to find out. He agreed to read Diana's complete memorandum, but not with lawyers, aides, or officials watching. He chose Catherine. The answer was waiting in Diana's handwriting, and when William finally opened those pages beside her, the entire meaning of Charlotte's inheritance changed. There were no lawyers in the room this time, no advisors, no royal machinery standing between William and the words his mother had left behind. Only Catherine sat beside him as he opened the memorandum that had governed the safe for decades. William began reading with suspicion still tightening his face, but halfway through the page, his anger disappeared. Diana had not chosen Charlotte to exclude her sons. She had chosen her to protect something from their pain. William had received formal authorization to examine the memorandum without opening the safe itself. The document mattered because it explained the purpose behind Diana's legal instructions, while still keeping the actual contents protected. Catherine agreed that whatever they learned should remain a family matter before becoming a palace statement. She knew one careless announcement could turn Charlotte from a granddaughter into a symbol before the girl had any chance to understand the burden attached to that role. William read slowly. Diana described the collection not as royal history, but as a record of personal identity. She wanted its eventual guardian to receive it, without feeling forced to defend her choices, condemn anyone else, or reopen conflicts that had already consumed too much of her life. The words struck William hard. He suddenly understood that both he and Harry would approach every letter first as sons. Every object could become grief. Every private reflection could tempt them to explain, protect, or answer for a mother they had spent years mourning. Catherine watched his expression change before speaking. Charlotte, she told him, might someday possess something he could never fully have: emotional distance. The girl could love Diana as a grandmother she never met, without reliving every argument, betrayal, and public wound that surrounded her adult life. William resisted the idea at first. Then he looked down at the memorandum again. Diana's reasoning went deeper. Her handwritten instruction described a future female descendant who might understand the pressures placed upon women living close to monarchy, yet belonged to a generation capable of judging those pressures differently. William finally saw that Charlotte had not been selected because she outranked anyone. She had been selected because distance itself was part of the protection. William reached the final paragraph and stopped. He could not continue aloud. Catherine finished it for him. The words asked the recipient's father not to control the collection, but to give the girl enough security to decide for herself what should remain private. William folded the letter and kept his hand resting over it. "She knew I would want to protect everything," Catherine answered quietly. "That may be exactly why she asked you to protect Charlotte instead." William made his decision immediately. Charlotte's inheritance would be described publicly only in the broadest terms. No letters, no objects, no private details. His explosion had finally become understanding, but outside those walls, the world was about to learn enough of Diana's decision to ignite a storm of its own. Once confirmation escaped the palace's private circle, the story became unstoppable. Diana, a hidden safe. Charlotte, three elements powerful enough to dominate every conversation about the monarchy within hours. Yet the public reaction was not simply fascination with what might be inside. Something deeper took hold. People began interpreting Diana's decision as a message passed across generations, from a woman whose life had become public property to a granddaughter being granted the right to choose privacy. William supported a deliberately restrained palace statement. It confirmed only that a privately administered inheritance connected to Diana had been legally designated for Charlotte, while refusing to identify a single object. Crown property, meaning possessions legally tied to the monarchy, rather than an individual royal, was specifically excluded from the arrangement. That distinction mattered because the inheritance was personal, not constitutional, and William wanted the public to understand that difference before speculation turned a family decision into a battle over royal power. Catherine watched the reaction grow with increasing concern. Charlotte's name was suddenly everywhere, attached to headlines, debates, and theories about a grandmother she had never known. William disliked it immediately. He had spent days fighting to understand Diana's intentions, only to watch strangers begin assigning meaning to his daughter before she had spoken a word. Catherine remained composed, but in private she admitted that the pressure frightened her. A child had become a symbol overnight. Then one public moment cut through the noise. Outside Kensington Palace, a small crowd gathered near the gates after broadcasters confirmed the legal designation. One woman placed white flowers beside a handwritten card that read, "From Diana's generation to Charlotte's." Cameras captured the gesture, and within hours the image was everywhere. Admirers saw continuity. Critics warned against turning a private inheritance into a constitutional statement. Either way, Diana's memory had taken control of the conversation again. William refused to feed the frenzy. Newspapers speculated relentlessly about the coded compartment inside the safe, but the palace would not confirm a single detail. He backed that silence completely. The more the public demanded answers, the more certain he became that Diana's greatest safeguard had never been the lock itself. It was the right to say no. William later watched footage of the flowers in silence. He lowered the volume and turned away. Catherine told him the public would keep guessing. "Guessing is something we can survive," he replied. Surrendering Charlotte's privacy is not. By then, the story had changed. The safe was no longer simply a mystery. It had become a test of whether the monarchy could protect something from public appetite. The world wanted it opened, but William finally understood that Diana's final gift was not access to its contents. It was the freedom to keep them closed. And one conversation still remained. This time, William would speak to Charlotte herself. The story had begun with William exploding across a legal table because he believed something precious had been taken from him. It ended with him understanding that nothing had been taken at all. Diana had not rejected her sons. She had entrusted one son with a task more difficult than ownership, raising the granddaughter, who would someday receive her private history, then allowing that granddaughter to decide what those memories meant, without pressure from a palace. a public, or a grieving father. William accepted the legal outcome at last. Diana's hidden safe remained designated for Princess Charlotte under the authenticated inheritance structure, meaning the legally verified arrangement controlling who receives the property and under what conditions. Neither his position as Charlotte's father nor his future place within the monarchy gave him ownership. The full inventory would remain private, and the coded compartment would stay sealed. Curiosity, he had finally learned, did not create entitlement. William chose to speak to Charlotte privately. He told her only what she needed to know. Her grandmother had left something important for her future, and nobody would force her to make decisions about it before she was ready. He expected questions about the safe, the objects, perhaps even their value. Instead, Charlotte asked something simpler. Did they matter to her? William paused before answering. Yes, he told her. They mattered deeply. Charlotte thought for a moment. Then that's how they should be treated. The answer struck William harder than any legal argument had. In that simple response, he finally saw what Diana's arrangement had been protecting. The safe had never been intended for the person with the strongest claim or the highest rank. It had been reserved for someone who could receive memory without turning it into proof, leverage, or a weapon in battles that belonged to another generation. William later told Harry through a private family conversation that the authenticated arrangement would be honored exactly as written. Harry accepted that neither brother would challenge Charlotte's designation. Both men carried different memories of Diana, but neither would ask the next generation to inherit their grief along with hers. Nothing remained to fight. William had begun this journey demanding control. He ended it understanding guardianship. His responsibility was not to possess what Diana had protected, but to protect Charlotte until she could decide for herself what should remain private. Before leaving, William told his daughter that one day the decision would belong entirely to her. "And you'll be all right with whatever I choose?" Charlotte asked. William hesitated. Then he said yes. That answer completed everything. Diana's hidden safe had not divided the family. It had clarified their roles. Charlotte became the guardian of a private legacy. William became its protector rather than its owner. And Diana's final boundary survived exactly as she intended. The mystery remained sealed, but its meaning was finally complete. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.